Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. It is a Tuesday evening. We played Thursday night football, and I'm joined, as always, with my lovely and talented and brilliant co-hosts, Nick Olson. How are you this evening?
I'm doing great, Greg. How are you doing?
Excellent, excellent. Matt Freese, how are you this evening?
Doing pretty good. Not so relaxing game, but I had a long, relaxing weekend after it. So,
it was very close. It was very close to being relaxing.
It was. It was very close. But in classic 2021 Vikings fashion, even our first blowout of the year is not a blowout. Naturally. Do you guys want to just dive right into this, maybe?
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. No screwing around tonight. Let's just get right into it. Obviously, we're very excited. We won the game. Week 14 in the books. We got the W. We talked about the importance of every game here, obviously. But that was an especially important one to get coming off the heels of a loss to the Lions, which had us kind of reeling a little bit. To be able to bounce back like that on a short week, really take it to the Steelers, at least for a half, felt very good. It felt very rejuvenating. Would you guys agree?
Oh, the first half was extremely rejuvenating. Yeah, it was exciting. Like it was vintage. It was some vintage of the best we've seen from the Vikings, right? The run game just absolutely mauling people up front, and the pressure on the defensive end, like the blitzes, just everything we were doing, we were just smothering that Steelers offense. So it was a ton of fun.
But go ahead, Nick. Sorry.
I mean, everything was clicking, especially early on. Like other than Greg Joseph's early missed field goal, literally all three phases of the game were just like clicking all over the place. Dalvin Cook,
and we got that luck back by them missing field goal right after. So it felt a lot better.
A kicker against the Vikings finally missed. It's a beautiful sight to see. Dalvin, I averaged 7.6 yards per carry. It was his best game in a very long time, which is insane considering both of his shoulders and his ankle were injured. He tore his labrum 10 days ago or 10 days before the game, goes on and puts up 205 yards, 2 touchdowns. It's insanity. Plus,
I was dreading
17-yard third down catch, like an incredible game from Dalvin. So
incredible game. This was the Dalvin Cook game of the year. I mean, I'm calling it the Dalvin Cook game, but there was a sensation watching this game that I remember, and it feels like ancient history now. But because there's been a lot of football in between, then and now. But one thing I remember watching was the sensation of everything was wide open. Defensively, we were getting free rushes, which I can't even really remember seeing much of that this year at all. We had guys just coming off unblocked. We had wide, ocean-wide gaps for Dalvin to run through.
We averaged over 10 yards per attempt before contact in the first half.
Incredible.
Before contact.
That's insane.
Incredible.
That's the most insane stat I've ever heard. I mean, and
the Steelers looked so flat. They looked so dead in the water.
Still hung up on that 10 yards before contact.
Before contact.
That doesn't happen. I mean, that happens at like the high school level when you're completely overmatching your opponents, and that's what it looked like. It looked like we were playing, professional ball, and they were playing high school ball. We were blowing them off the line, just destroying them. I completely wrote the Steelers off.
Yeah.
And after the first half, I was like, this is not happening for them tonight. Like, this is over.
I knew better.
But that's a mistake that I have made all year long, because that's the torture of watching an inconsistent football team, right? You're really never off the hook, even though you should be. And that was a game where we absolutely should be. So, guys, we had that great first half, and then second half was like a completely different story. Completely different team came out on the field. What did you guys notice in the second half? Like, what was happening? I have some ideas of what was going on, but I was pretty shell-shocked, to be honest with you.
They made some defensively. They made some good adjustments in the run game where they stopped playing so much too high, and to the extent they did, what really happened in the first half is they played like too high, and guys got out of gaps because you have guys two gapping or something, and which is really tough to do at the NFL level against NFL offensive linemen and stuff. So they switched to more bare fronts, and they were more gap sound, and they didn't crash downhill as much. That's another thing. So much of the Vikings first half offense like took advantage of the fact that like Devin Bush and Tremaine Edmonds, these guys like really like to crash down hard when the flow of the play goes one way, and they can like shoot their gap instead of scraping over. So they tweaked a few things in the second half that caused Dalvin Cook to not average 10 yards before contact on average. So that was the run game. In the passing game, Cousins' accuracy, I don't know if he got hurt or something, but it got kind of like wonky. It actually, even before the second half started, I'm not sure. Somebody like mentioned he might have like hurt a rib or something, because there were a lot of throws that were just off.
Let's tamp down on Kirk for a second.
Yeah.
Let's tamp down on this, because this was, definitely his worst game of the year. Like, I test statistics.
Completion percentage wise, yes.
I thought he was pretty much dog shit. I'm going to be honest. I really did not. I thought he was really bad in this game.
He had some amazing like big time throws in this game, like the 50-yarder to KJ Osborne, a couple of little deep ones to Justin Jefferson, like a couple of the Justin Jefferson drops. Like Jefferson dropped, I think, 2, arguably 3 touchdowns in this game. So there was. I would say it's the most up or down we've seen from Cousins. There was bad and good.
When I say Kirk Cousins is bad or had a bad game, you guys know my nickname for Kirk Cousins. It's 50-50. Okay. It's the half the time he looks like that top 5, top 10, elite kind of guy. The other half the time he looks like he shouldn't be on the field. So that's kind of what I mean. Like, I agree. He had some great throws. Matt, you were. Yeah,
I think it was a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde from Cousins in this game, and we got.
I literally have that on my notes. Jekyll and Hyde. I wrote that.
We had a little bit more of the bad from especially the second half, right, with those 2 picks. Just going through some of the big plays though. That first pass to Jefferson, I guess it's a drop by Jefferson. I think that's just a really tight window throw that Kirk put in there perfectly, but it wasn't quite perfect enough. That's a really difficult catch that you're asking Jefferson to make at full speed on the run with one hand, because he can't get 2 hands on it just with how far away it is from his body. On the second touchdown that Jefferson dropped, I think that's a drop on Jefferson. And then there was a third one, like the drive after that, on a crosser where Kirk, something was off with the throw from Kirk. I don't think he got hit before releasing the ball, but something, either the pressure or something, and the throw was a bit wobbly and it was a little bit behind Jefferson. It was just off in terms of timing. And I think that one would be accounted to drop by Jefferson, but I'm not really sure it's fully on him either, just because the throw was not great. And then the 2 picks, I think the first one is mostly a good defensive play, but if you're putting blame on an offense player, it's on Kirk because he didn't hit the window he thought he could hit. And the second one, to me, is more on the play design and KJ Osborne, because of the predictability of the play design. The corner jumps it, and Osborne stumbles a little bit and also loses the route, right? So that's something where the ball just needs to be out. And unfortunately, like, the corner was where the ball needed to be rather than KJ Osborne. And that's on a couple of different factors. But
you and I bounced that play back and forth a little bit this week, Matt. And I ended up coming around to your point of view that was a bad play call. But that in that situation, throwing a kind of a could be risky pass when you really need to possess the ball there, I felt like was a. Did you change your mind?
Well, to me, it's like it was slant flat. It's like a very standard 3rd and medium play call. So
especially for the Vikings. Yeah.
Especially for the Vikings. But I think that's part of the problem, where it's not like a bad play design necessarily, but because of the rate at which we call it, it becomes like predictable. And at that point, it's problematic. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, just in terms of the passing game and how it's maybe a bit predictable. But I will say, I thought Cousins' continued aggression, even though he was throwing picks in the second half, was a good sign moving forward.
Yeah, totally. Okay. And I think it's funny because a lot of times when we see the Vikings like put up a lead and then like the defense or the other team claws their way back into it, it happens as a result of the Vikings sort of turtling up and getting too conservative. And now they just run the ball until they punt it early and drives end up stalling and teams end up clawing their way back. But what happened in this game really is They were up 29-0, and they come out first play of the second half, and they show a shot, 30 yards down the field or something. It gets tipped, it gets picked. That happens sometimes when you dial up shot plays, but I love the fact that they kept going at the throat up 29. They're like, no, let's run up the score. That's not something you usually see with a Mike Zimmer defense. Maybe all these one-score games has made Mike Zimmer see the run up the score light a little bit here. But
turns out we needed those extra points too. Unfortunately, we only got 7 of them, but 6 of them. But
so I like that. I think this game shows that. If Kirk Cousins can just push the ball downfield a little bit more and be a little more aggressive, and they can design plays that bring out that aggression out of Kirk Cousins, if you can scheme up the big time throws out of Kirk Cousins, the mistakes you'll see, the fact that maybe Kirk Cousins won't only have 3 interceptions, maybe he'll no longer have the fewest interceptions in the NFL, but I think he'll play a more winning style of football, because you're going to end up making up for it by you'll throw more interceptions, but you'll throw a lot more touchdowns, and you'll have a lot fewer shorter, 3-and-out drives or stalling drives. So I think this, if anything, this game was an example. And we saw, we had an interception on the first in the first drive of the second half, but then later on in the second half, we have kind of the dagger to KJ Osborne. It didn't ultimately end up being the dagger, but that was a big momentum shifter there. Of the bomb to KJ Osborne. They're still continuing to throw bombs downfield. So that was great to see.
You guys are letting him off the hook, but it is my right as a fan to keep him on the hook. And I'm going to keep him on the hook this week. I thought he played poorly, and I think we need a lot more from him.
So I've
never seen him throw so many uncatchable passes. I'll say that much.
He was dirting them. He was overthrowing them. He was all over the place in this game. You guys always have a much more even-tempered point of view on the performances of this team. I'm not going to let Kirk off the hook this game. I don't think he played well.
I do want to clarify. I don't think Kirk had a good game. I think obviously when you throw those 2 picks and you let the other team back in the game, it's problematic. I will say that this game was on the pretty extreme end in terms of Kirk's accuracy on the bad end, right? He was unusually inaccurate in this game. So if you see this continued level of aggression and he bounces back from the accuracy perspective in terms of his throws deep down the field, I think you get a much better product. And I think that's why it's a bit more promising to Nick and I.
So you guys are saying that you like the mentality, if not the result. Okay, I agree with that.
I've seen enough seasons of Kirk Cousins being one of the more accurate, if not one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the NFL, that I trust that this was just a bad game and he'll bounce back, whether it was a rib injury or whatever, that he'll bounce back. If I'm encouraged, and hopefully we see this aggression being a thing going forward.
Okay, I would agree with that. I'll agree with that. That's as far as I can agree, though.
And one more thing I do want to add, we kind of glossed over it a little bit, but this goes back to the run game. I mean, honestly, the Steelers in the first half of this game did not look like, you mentioned it earlier, they looked like a high school team. They did not look like a competent NFL team.
They were sniping at each other on the sidelines. Everything was bad.
Yeah. The comeback in the second half, especially our offense slowing down. Now, there's a couple factors to it, but the number one thing is the Steelers really just got their stuff together in run defense, right? We talk about, and I'm not trying to talk down on our execution, because we executed incredibly in the first half. The blocking was great. The offensive line was doing a great job creating those holes and executing what they needed to do. And obviously Dalvin as a running back was doing a great job manipulating defenders and forcing them to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. But part of the reason we average over 10 yards before contact is because the other team is playing very bad, right? Mm-hmm. The best teams in the NFL don't do that when they're executing at a high level. That's an extremely rare thing that I would like somebody to pull up the number of times that's happened, because I doubt it's very many. It's not going to pull up, but yeah.
Did you guys notice anything else that the Steelers were doing, adjustments that they made that were contributed to this sort of tonal shift for us?
I think the biggest thing that the Steelers did on offense is they started running the ball a lot more efficiently, and it wasn't a difference in play calls. They had a number of explosive runs in the second half. They were really just shotgun inside zone, but they came at times when we were sort of gapped out. It was too high. and Kendricks didn't scrape over in time, or Sheldon Richardson gave up the edge, or James Lynch got pushed off the ball like 3 yards because he's very technically sound, but he's also like just 290 pounds going up against, when he should be like 20 pounds heavier than that if he wants to play nose tackle or defensive tackle. So, they got some explosive runs off. And then the biggest thing of all that we haven't mentioned yet is they started really coming down with some insane contested catches. I mean, there were two, I think, almost back-to-back plays that were simultaneous interceptions / catches, which you don't see very often, but that tie always goes to the wide receiver. So
Claypool, for all his boneheadedness in this game, my goodness, that one grab he made on his back.
It wasn't just him. Deontay Johnson had one. I think Washington had one or two. Like it was pretty wild. And Ben Roethlisberger had a couple of like really nice throws. So they came out of the second half and just started looking like the winning record team they were. So
I think at this point we can just let go of any inkling, like any little thing we were holding on to that we would have a clean game this year, because you cannot beat a team more soundly than the Vikings beat the Steelers in the first half of that game. You can't do it. Like that, literally, if you were going to draw it up, kick an opponent's ass, that's how it looks. Literally, every facet of the game is wide open. And then to come out in the second half and almost fart that thing away, at this point, I think we can just know that every week is going to be like this. And there's just nothing we can do about it. This is who we are, quite literally.
Yeah. So, and in that second half, like Nick mentioned, and I'm really glad you brought it up, Nick, because that's the number one thing to me. The 50-50 balls that Ben was throwing up, it's literally like there were 4 plays where he hits the top of his drop, releases the ball immediately, so there's no chance for a pass rush to get there at all. And the ball goes up and they win it. Right. The first time Boyd, I think, was a little late to turn around, but it's still a simultaneous catch. Like at first you thought Boyd almost caught that ball live. Yeah. Peterson there got his hand in there and played great defense, but he just didn't, but Claypool comes down with it over top. And then there were 2 penalties, one on Boyd again, where Deontay Johnson also still caught the ball, which was insane. And then finally, the one on the final drive where Breland got the penalty. And then James Washington had the touchdown over the middle where that was a well-placed ball over Xavier Woods and under Harrison Smith, I think was the safety. Or I'm sorry, Patrick Peterson was the corner, was under him and over Xavier Woods. Xavier Woods didn't quite get enough depth on it, so it just layered in over his head. But like those balls, one of those goes different and it's not even close at the end. But all 4 or 5 went the Steelers' way. And those are more in the 50-50 style of ball. So, it was a little bit fluky, I think, the Steelers coming back. Not to say that, like, this whole season has been a little bit fluky with that sort of thing. So maybe when something keeps happening, right?
Right. At some point, do you have some responsibility for that?
Yeah, but
one thing that was not fluky, and I think this could be, at least for me, the last thing I want to say before we get into our next segment. One thing was not fluky was the crowd noise. Wow. I mean, that was the first game I think we've had in a couple of years, obviously last year. And really this year, that was the first time I really can remember the crowd making a huge impact on the Steelers throughout the game. Shout out to the crowd. That was really, really cool to see.
Yeah, I don't think we get that many unblocked sacks if it weren't for the crowd noise screwing things up. I mean, anytime.
And they had penalties.
This is basically prime conditions for like Mike Zimmer scheming and tinkering and scheming up unblocked blitzers, like rookie center who struggles to know what protections to call, really loud game at home, like all those things combined. And then like Harrison Smith on top of his game, like all these things combined, like they're going to get home a number of times. So it was good to see.
It was good to see. You guys ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do some tape talk, baby. Tape talk. Let the boys take over. Let the nerds do it.
Only for the true grinders who last this long into the podcast.
Yeah. The munchers, the real grinders. Where do you guys want to start? We have a few different things you were thinking about going over tonight.
Nick just mentioned it. Let's start with Zimmer's blitz packages, right?
Let's do it.
So He was dialing it up in the first half. And honestly, I think he was kind of dialing it up a little bit in the second half. We just had a couple of things happen where it didn't work out quite as well. So first half, aggressive all day. I think there's the delayed bar blitz where he got the non-call, like the not horse collar. First of all, it was a great block by Najee Harris, but that was nasty. And I don't know how Ben got the ball out on that play, honestly. Like, that was a pretty sweet throw by him. Harrison Smith had his unblocked sack where it looked like he killed Ben on that play. Honestly, there were a couple hits in the first half where there were unblocked blitzers and Ben looked real rough. But that was actually really cool because they came back later and flipped the blitz. So, it was your traditional, and I think it's funny. When you see guys talk about it, they always go this for double mug. If you watch like a quarterback talk about the double A-gap mug, they'll always put the two fists up. So they call it a double mug, right? And you got Kendricks in, and you have like 8 guys across the line of scrimmage with Harrison Smith on the one end and Mackenzie Alexander in the slot on the other end. The Steelers have trips to the right, so they've got 3 wide receivers to the right on that play, and the Vikings are sending the pressure from the left. Now the Steelers slide their line to the right, which I don't really understand from the protection call in this situation, because to me, when you're doing that, you can replace one of those blitzers from the right edge with a hot route. You can't do anything from the left edge if you get a free runner. So you're sliding the guys to the right, and 2 of those guys drop out to help with coverage. So you're looking to the right already. You had 2 guys drop into coverage on that side, and that's what causes Ben to hold on to the ball half a second longer, and Harrison Smith, unblocked from the back end, hits him in the back. Later in the game, they fixed it, but the Vikings flipped the blitz. So now they're sliding to the not trip side. They're sliding to the other side, and you have Eric Kendricks. This was Eric Kendricks. Kendricks was the one who had that sack, right? Where he came unblocked as well. So this was Eric Kendricks' sack. And you have Kendricks on that side coming through the B gap, and Mac Alexander blitzing on that side to the trip side. And Ben opens up to the not trip side, which I don't really understand why he did that either. I think you want to read the blitz that's potentially coming at you if you have the right side blocked up. So that was a little bit of a protection thing, but it was cool that they flipped it and they got him blindsided twice on a very similar blitz look and blitz call. So I thought that was cool. And even in the second half, we were getting free rushers, but those were the plays where Ben was just chucking the ball up, and the 49ers receiver, I keep saying 49ers, I feel like the Steelers receivers ended up
still stuck on week 12.
I know. The Steelers receivers kept coming down with it. So the blitz designs were super cool.
Awesome. Nick, do you have anything to add? Anything that you caught with blitzing this week? Or would you like to run right into the next
well, why don't we can just dive into the next one.
Let's do it.
I wanted to talk. So obviously, story of the game here is Dalvin Cook going for 205, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Plus that what was kind of also a dagger was that 17-yarder on 3rd down, that catch he had, which was an insane catch. But I wanted to talk about the run game because I think Rick Dennison and Clint Kubiak have done a really great job scheming up the run game this year. But I thought this was their best run designed game yet. And I feel like the execution was good in the run game. Like, obviously, Dalvin's a special player. He sets up blocks in a way other backs don't.
He looked so fast this week.
Yeah, he looked explosive as heck. And
oh my
when he
gosh.
Anytime he gets into the open field, like, he's as good as, well, I don't want talking too much purple pros, but like, he's a very special player when you get him, when he gets past the first level, and all of a sudden
you can say it. He's as good as anybody. He can run with anybody.
He will outrun anybody. He will destroy angles, and like, he will force a way to just sort of slither around and slide around, and people won't be able to bring him down. So it was a really fun to see. But as good as like Dalvin was, as good as the blocking was, and I thought this was a very well blocked game for the offensive line, especially in the first half. I think the biggest key to the success was the run game design. And I thought they did a lot of really interesting things. We ran, we had, I think, 7 explosive runs, 10+ yard runs. And 3 of those were off wide zone. So just kind of our bread and butter. It's a Kubiak team. More than anybody else, Gary Kubiak ran the most wide zone of anybody in the NFL. That was after Mike Shanahan and Gary Kubiak kind of invented it in the late 90s, or maybe didn't invent it, but like made it like won Super Bowls with it and made it a big thing.
Yeah, the Broncos. Yeah.
Now in this game, so we set up a lot of wide zone runs, but then we also, more than any other game I've seen from the Vikings, we ran so much counter. Counter is a play where it's kind of like you run wide zone one way, but then the running back takes a couple steps that way and then cuts back the other way and cuts back like across the grain of the formation.
For the listeners who might be curious, or the objective being to get the defense to move one way, and then all your blockers are going that way. So they're and then you basically suck them all up.
It takes advantage of these aggressive linebackers who love to crash down and shoot gaps. And because you get them to shoot the gaps, and it's almost like a trap play or something. It's like they shoot the gaps and then all of a sudden they're taking themselves out of the play. And it's really effective. And the way the Vikings do it, it's a counter play when you pull somebody else to the other side. So we had a lot of Ezra Cleveland in space pulling, and Ezra Cleveland is, he's like a 99th percentile athlete. So good when you get him pulling out in space and stuff. But we also used CJ Ham to great effect with pulling. So we had, G counter, the guard counter, or GF counter, the guard and the fullback counter, GY counter, the guard and the tight end count pulling across. So there were a lot of really explosive plays. And I thought it was just, it reminded me a lot of Kyle Shanahan. I think Kyle Shanahan likes a lot of these wind back and counter type runs where he'll set you up with wide zone, but then he'll come back around and get you with counter so that, the teams start selling out to stop the wide zone, but then all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's going the other way. And so now their heads all confused. And then while they're thinking left or right, that's when you do the play action and throw it over their heads. And
they're getting their butts kicked by large men.
Totally. So, just the play sequencing, the run game diversity, the innovation, the fact that we got to see a lot of counter, which is, I think of like the Ravens as more of a counter team, or the 49ers as more of a counter team. We don't normally run a lot of that stuff, but man, it was so effective. And then other stuff, like I think we've done some very good self-scouting, and we're becoming a lot less predictable as an offense. Like, for example, Dalvin Cook's second touchdown, I think, was off. It looked like a duo run to me, but it was out of shotgun, and Dalvin was able to just sort of bounce it outside, and the cornerback took a bad angle, and the cornerback crashed hard inside, and then Dalvin was able to just sort of like run around them and jog into the end zone. And we're not really a duo team, and we're not really a shotgun running team, but I think it was a great example of this team like seeing its tendencies and realizing, okay, when we're in shotgun, we hardly ever run the ball. Let's start running the ball. Like Dalvin had his longest run of the day, that 30-yarder. That was also like a shotgun inside zone type run. So being able to incorporate these new concepts, being able to run effectively from the shotgun, being able to build in new counter concepts, and then being able to not just have this like this messy soup of plays in your playbook that you call out random, but to know like this one is going to set up this one, which will set up this one, and we're all going to sequence it. I thought that was all really, really impressive. So I loved what they did with the run game design in this game. And as good as like Bradbury played, Mason Cole had a good game. I thought Ezra Cleveland did really well, especially considering he was going up a lot against Cam Hayward. And Brian O'Neill, started out against their elite pass rusher. So good game all around from the offensive line, other than Oliudo, I guess. But as good as the execution was, I thought the run game design really, really contributed to this sort of one of the best games I think Dalvin's ever had.
It was awesome to see him out there just gutting people again this week.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to add on about Dalvin is like, honestly, it was kind of clear that he wasn't 100% either. Like, we talked about his burst through the line, but he was shying away from contact a little bit as a runner, which he's not like the most powerful guy in the world, but he doesn't shy away from contact when he's normally healthy. You could tell he was trying to protect that shoulder a little bit, which makes it even more impressive how like strong he was this game. And one other small add is like the offensive line. It's kind of funny how good, and this is based on who we drafted, but like you can basically pull our entire offensive line and it looks really good. So that's pretty nice. And that really helps with when we add more diversity to the game, that's a really nice aspect of it, because it's not as predictable when you have only one guy who can pull, right? Effectively. So I think that's nice.
That's a good thing. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. We had some disagreements, but one thing we agreed on was we liked the passing aggression. And that's something else you guys noticed on tape this week. Do you want to unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I sort of mentioned it earlier when I was talking about how it was awesome that even while up 29, they were still calling shot plays. I think really in the last 5 games, I feel like Clint Kubiak has kind of hit his groove, and he's starting to understand this is what I can get away with. I'm going to not call this because it's too cute, but I am going to figure that. I think what he's really figured out is he's figured out how to balance the short plays with the shot plays. And he's also figured out how to unlock the intermediate route concepts. I think Kirk Cousins had his highest average depth of target, I think, of any game this year in this past game. If his accuracy weren't off, it would have been like one of the most impressive performances all year because he had a lot of like really impressive throws. If it weren't for his inaccuracy, and then the Vikings couldn't make any contested catches this week either, which was, we talked a lot about how the Steelers came down with a lot of those insane catches. The Vikings were over 5 on contested catches against Pittsburgh. So the stat sheet won't necessarily reflect it, but you look at like Kirk Cousins' next gen stats passing chart, he was spraying it all over everywhere. And I feel like it's become a really balanced attack. There are a few different concepts they were using to attack teams, and I feel like they've gotten a little bit better. They're incorporating more just sort of like flat 5-step dropbacks. They're willing to test their offensive line a little bit more. There's more play action, or at least it's coming at good moments, and they're not just attacking like vertical routes or fade routes downfield, but they're doing more intermediate crossers, dig routes. We saw post routes this week too. So anything that like can attack, I feel like their route concepts are especially this last week, like deep dig routes or deep comeback routes or like curl routes in the middle of the field. They were really set up well to get guys open in space and get the defense to think one thing and make one coverage call and then go back and hit them with something else. So I feel like not just the run game, but also the passing game has kind of hit its groove. And I'm really impressed by the way they're able to balance attacking all 3 levels of the field and both between the hashes, but also outside the numbers. So I thought overall, offensively, defensively, this was our best coach game this year. So that makes me a little more optimistic about this team going forward, because I feel like there's been a lot of our problems in previous games has been Clint Kubiak being green, not really knowing, being just a first-year play caller and him being new to it, and Zimmer making some mistakes or not blitzing enough or not giving enough help on the back end to his cornerbacks. This was a game where I really feel like everybody knew exactly what they were doing, how to take advantage of their opponents' weaknesses. So that was great to see on pretty much all levels. So even though like the Steelers ended up coming back, I feel like that wasn't really on coaching. I feel like offensively, we're still calling a good game. Defensively, Zimmer still knew what he was doing on defense, but the Steelers wide receivers started making plays. Najee Harris had some pretty crazy runs, and then offensively, like Kirk threw a couple bad interceptions, and guys weren't able to bring in any contested catches or things on third down. So it was in a weird way. It's funny to be like, I'm happy that the problem was due to execution as opposed to coaching, but like I think it's a good thing that because I know that like Justin Jefferson is going to catch most of his 50-50 balls, even if he didn't last week. So I'm hopeful that those positive signs from the coaching can keep up going forward.
Yeah, on that last coaching point, the Steelers had 4 touchdowns in this game, right? 2 were off of short fields, off of the interceptions. 1 was that long drive where Najee had that Herculean run to get that first down, and then you had the Chris Boyd penalty and all that stuff. And the other one, they hit 2 shot plays. They hit the one to Deontay down the sideline, and then the next play they hit James Washington for a touchdown over the middle. So it's like really they were all lightning fast, and they were all execution errors or mental mistakes by the defense rather than coaching. I feel I agree.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you guys too. I mean, it's definitely player issues this week, and it's a shame too, because that first half felt so good, and it would really have been nice to have this nice long break after a beatdown instead of we almost kind of gave that away feeling.
Yeah, especially we could have avoided the stress on the final drive.
Yes, that would have been very nice. It would have been very nice, and I'm sure Chase Claypool agrees.
Speaking of the final drive, one thing, it's not in our notes, but one thing I definitely want to touch on before we leave the Steelers game. Yeah. This was one of the best games Harrison Smith has had, I think, in his entire career.
Oh, yes.
He was everywhere. And like, when I mean everywhere, like he had a play where the Vikings were in cover 2 and he was showing blitz before the snap. And then once like Roethlisberger brings his knee up to like signal I'm ready for the snap, he drops back all the way like 14 yards back to get into his cover 2 zone. And then it turns out to be like an inside zone run that Najee Harris bounces outside. So Smith then all of a sudden like immediately charges down, makes the play at the line of scrimmage or like, at 2 yards off the line of scrimmage or whatever, run stop. And that was like one of his more pedestrian plays. Like we talked about that sack he had where he's so good timing and disguising and knowing exactly when the snap is coming. He's like legitimately a really good pass rusher. So like if he's coming in unsacked, he's able to time it really, really well. And he's able to burst upfield and bend into the quarterback really well in a way that I think a lot of other safeties aren't. And he's able to disguise so well. And like the reason we have so many unblocked sacks is because of what Harrison Smith does pre-snap to a team's protections and the way he can kind of like amoeba and like disguise things and you never really know what he's doing or what he's up to.
Yeah.
And then that's not even, we haven't even gotten to like he forced a fumble that like was ultimately called back, but like it was an incredible punch. And then he literally had the game winning play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we haven't even mentioned that yet, but like Freiermuth had the touchdown, the game's tying touchdown in his hands, and Harrison Smith just punched it out perfectly. Like you couldn't have done it any better. Like he punches it straight out. So man, like, what a game from a dude who's been doing this is his 10th year. Like what a career he's had. So that's awesome.
And
he's awesome.
That run defense play that you mentioned earlier, like that was incredible. The other thing that was an issue there, or potentially an issue, and actually Barr, I thought, made a great play on that play too, because the Vikings were in their double A gap mug, and it's an outside run with a puller, and Barr gets out, and I think they got called for holding on that play because the guy held Barr on the puller because Barr got outside so quickly and strung that run out for Harrison to scream down over the top, which is ridiculous. Like he shouldn't have been able to be at the line of scrimmage, teleport back like 15 yards behind, and still make the tackle 2 yards past the line of scrimmage. Like that was nuts.
Well, the reality is it was a W. No matter which way you slice it, no matter what happened, all the good feelings, bad feelings, whatever, we got the win. And it was a big one. We really needed that coming off that loss from the Lions, as we said earlier. So now we're still in the home stretch here. We're still in the mix. A win could vault us potentially right back into the seeded positions. Another loss could doom the season. I mean, it's like that every week right now, and it's probably going to be like that, especially if we keep spiking up and down like we've been.
So just want to head this off. I was looking at playoff scenarios a little bit, and NYT actually has a playoff predictor. The Vikings, if they go 3-1, have a very good chance of making playoffs. If we get 2-2, we basically have no chance of making playoffs. So we need to win 3 of our next 4 games, and that means we need to take care of business against this game we're about to talk about, the Bears.
On Monday Night Football
games against them, because our other 2 games are against the Rams and Packers.
Yeah.
So
this is a big one, and we're going into Soldier Field, which is a place that we traditionally struggle. Pretty much doesn't matter what Vikings group it is. It always seems to be a tough place for us to play. I think the Bears are terrible. But I've been on this show saying that multiple times this year, and games have been
Don't
close,
jinx us,
so
Greg. Not this
I have
time.
nothing to add. I'm just, I'm saying I think they're terrible, but we're going into Soldier Field, and it's Monday Night Football, and weird things happen. And what's your general impression of the Bears first, before we get into the details here?
So I don't think the Bears are very good. I would agree with that assessment. I will say I went to the Bears-Vikings game on Monday Night Football in 2016 when we started 5-0 and we lost to the Bears, who were terrible. So I've watched this team lose to the Bears I don't know, what's our record against Matt Nagy? Like 1-5 or like 2-5 or something awful.
Something that it shouldn't be.
Yeah, it's legitimately something it should be, because they have seemed to have our number for a little bit. That being said, especially like the biggest thing the Bears have beaten us with is their defensive line, which had been dominant with Hicks and Goldman and Khalil Mack, and Mack's on IR, and I think Goldman is out as well. So
Eddie Goldman and Mario Edwards tested positive, or they're on the COVID IR. Okay. So, and they're unvaccinated. So they're going.
Okay, so they are unvaccinated. So they will guaranteed be out. It's not they have 5 days to test negative twice. So that is big for us, because I really think that makes a difference on their defense, because their secondary isn't very good. Roquan Smith is good in the middle, but I think, you need, like we've seen, you need defensive tackles, and if you don't have them, your very good linebackers might not matter. And their secondary is at a ton of busts this year. Like, they're not on the same page at all. I think that's really an exploitable thing on their team.
Yeah, there's definitely this isn't like in a vacuum. I don't think this is a good team. I will say the things that they're good at are things that kind of worry me a little bit. Like Justin Fields, I think he's a rookie quarterback and he's making rookie quarterback mistakes. He's got 10 interceptions and 10 fumbles. He leads the league in fumbles, or he's tied with, I think, maybe Lamar or somebody. So like, he's not like necessarily like he's playing great or somebody that you should be worried about, but Mike Zimmer struggles, I think, a little bit with these unpredictable scrambling quarterbacks who are a threat to take off at any moment and can destroy angles when they're up against, whoever in space. So that's a little concerning. And
Fields has shown the ability to throw that deep ball too, which is something
for all his mistakes and for all that he hangs on to the ball a long time, and he does. He has the highest average depth of target of any quarterback too, which is, when they've got speedy receivers, or 50-50 receivers like Robinson or Mooney downfield. Yeah. It's tough, especially for this team that we saw last week wasn't able to make the play in contested catch situations, and we've seen all year can get burned deep, because as good as they are for covering for 3 seconds, the quarterback is able to scramble, hold on to the ball a little bit, and then toss it downfield, which is like that's what all Justin Fields does this year. It's going to be tough for Bashad Breeland, Patrick Peterson, Mackenzie Alexander, or whoever to like run with guys downfield. So
they're going to have to run a lot.
All that to say, like, this isn't a good team, but they're good at things, and we've seen Matt Nagy do this too. Like Zimmer, I feel like Nagy is always very good against Mike Zimmer, and it's for weird things that like Zimmer loves to like do kind of like cover one type concepts on third down, or he'll like bring blitz concepts that leave guys one-on-one in coverage a lot. Or he'll like crowd guys at the sticks, and he'll give up explosives on third down at the risk of, he'll give up the risk of explosives on third down just to get stops. And I feel like Nagy and Mitch Trubisky were always very good at like, okay, you're gonna give me a one-on-one fade to the outside. I'll just chuck it up, and boom, Allen Robinson's coming down with it for like a 30-yard gain on third and long, and those are just killers. So, all that's to say, like, it's easy for me, unlike the Lions, it's easy for me to concoct ways for the Bears to beat this team. So
yeah, I'm not going to disrespect the Lions quite the same level as, the Bears quite the same level as I disrespected the Lions. Definitely not going to.
I agree with that assessment. I think you see the flashes like every single game with Justin Fields. The consistency is not there on the whole. He has not played well this year, but like, man, is he talented. He's like talented. every single time. And yeah, the concern is they seem to have had our numbers. So what's really changed? And with how this team has played this year, like, you can't expect them to actually get everything right all of the time.
So forget the Bears for a second. Let's presume, let's give the Bears respect. Let's say that they do beat us. Okay. Soldier Field, whatever weird stuff happens. We end up losing this game. They did just play the Packers, down to the wire for the most part. So it's not like they are pushovers.
I don't know. I think the Packers had a lot of busts in that game that were most of the Bears' production.
I agree, but the reality is, they were in it. And so let's say we lose this game to the Bears. We've got and I agree, Matt, 100%. We have to win 3 of the next 4. I think to have a realistic shot at the playoffs. We talked about this already, but it snaps more into focus as we march along here. You follow that game up with a game against the now back in action Rams, and then you've got a Packers game in Lambeau. Those are your next 2 games after that. If you have to win both of those games, that is a really tall order.
Yeah,
that's a really tall order. Neither one of those teams is going to roll over for us. So, and the Rams really need to win because they're playing for a division title. The Packers, maybe Rodgers' toe is bothering him. They shut him down until the playoffs. Like maybe we get lucky there. This Bears game is kind of big, huh?
Yeah.
We kind of need this one.
Yeah, we really do. Like we can't, like Nick said, the risk for explosives, we can't let that happen to us.
Yeah.
The Packers special teams was atrocious. I mean, like atrocious. Like I can't remember a worse special teams performance I've seen from a single team in a game. So I think I'm a little bit less worried about, you know, the Bears in general. Like I don't think they're going to be able to put up the production. But like if they win those 50-50 balls down the field that the Steelers did, or they hit big plays like Jamar Chase did against us with Darnell Mooney, right? Or who was in the Cowboys game? Like Cedric Wilson showed up in the Cowboys game, hit a couple big plays on the outside. You know, that could be the difference in the game because
they have a rushing attack. Montgomery is solid.
And Montgomery has been injured a little bit this year, but he's back, and they've always run well on us.
Yeah,
under Nagy. So
it's a big one, boys. We need this one. All right, what are your predictions, though? Do we win or do we lose? One by one here. Nick, what do you think?
I think we win by a touchdown. It's a one-score game, but we win.
Yeah, no more blowout predictions on this show. Matt,
I think I would agree, and I think the touchdown is more we're up 10 or you know, similar to the Chargers game where we're up by a little bit and they score late, making it a little bit interesting, but we're able to salt the game away at the end there.
I'm going to agree with you guys. I think we win this one. I think it's close, but I don't feel good about it.
I think the extra time to prepare helps. I think the urgency of needing to win. And I think the Vikings' propensity for keeping their fans engaged until they can break their heart even worse the next time really all combine to a Vikings win.
It's, you know what the trick is? We win in Soldier Field and we need the win at home at the end of the year. And
that's when we lose. Just like the year where they rested their starters and we still lost to them.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that one.
Vikings, markets have the Vikings favored by 3.5 points, maybe 4 points, depending on which sports book you're looking at.
That makes me feel gross too. Why are we all
a touchdown? This? But considering it's at Soldier Field, I don't think that's it. You know, that seems I would never bet against the Vikings, and I would never bet in general. But I wouldn't have been shocked if it were less than that. So this is a game they should win, but could also, you know, football's random, and there's a 1 in 3 chance about Bears pulling this one away. So, anything else you guys want to throw in about the Bears before we close out with our final segment of the evening? I hate the Bears. The snow going once.
Not about the Bears, but. Harkening back to the Steelers game, if we do get into that end of game scenario against the Steelers, we were a lot more aggressive than we were against the Lions. Lions, we sat back, we blitzed over 50% of the time against the Steelers on that final drive. So
that's a really good thing.
We really changed it up. I just wanted to mention that because we talked a lot last week about the passiveness. We were a lot more aggressive. It burned us on the Breland pass interference, but it also we didn't get home with any of them. But we changed it up, so I think that was nice to see.
Great point, Matt. I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay, now it's time for my favorite segment: 15 seconds of fantasy. We're all in a fantasy league together, and we know that our listeners don't want to hear us talk about our fantasy teams, but we desperately want to talk about them. I know Nick and I do. Matt, maybe not so much. So every week we dedicate 15 seconds of this show to fantasy football. Each one of us gets 5 seconds. Time by me. Starting now. Go, Nick.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire healthy. Saquon Barkley healthy. This is a team that was already first in points on
Matt, go. You're done, Nick. Matt, go.
So we missed the playoffs. We're ready for next year, except we have no draft picks. This is fine.
I'm in the playoffs, baby, and I got there by winning 6 games in a row. All right,
Nick went 12-1,
13-1 actually. I can't believe I just corrected you. I'm
trying to give a perfect season.
Trying to give Nick extra credit.
I can't even get any joy out of it.
This guy's head is so huge. Like I need to build him up for it. All right, guys, this was a lot of fun. Where can people find you on Twitter, Matt? And it's if you're watching us on YouTube, it's below us here.
You can find me at Fries Football on Twitter.
Nick, where can people find you on Twitter?
I'm at Nick Olson NFL.
Excellent. You can find me on Twitter or on Instagram at You've Been Gregged with 3 G's. You can find us as a collective at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. We are available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you would like to watch the video version of this show, you can find us by searching for Kindred Skulls on YouTube. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Let's see what happens with these Bears this week. Let's wish each other luck. I'm going to give you a hug, digital hug.
We're bringing it in. We're
Matt gave me a hug. Matt's never given me a digital hug before.
Virtual hugs.
Nick is all
this is so weird. I introduced this ironically. When I did the virtual hugs, it was an ironic thing, and now we're venturing over into semi-ironic. We're going to be
not ironic at all anymore, man.
Unironically.
This is love.
This is how it happens.
Yeah, it is absolutely.
This looks really weird. If you're listening on audio, you're making a good decision right now because this looks really weird.
You need to just get in touch with your emotions, Nick. That's your problem. You're too bottled up.
If we got Oliudo on this podcast, he'd give us a hug.
Yeah,
it might be his past set, but it'd also be a hug.
All the Udos all around. Have a great rest of your week, boys.
Another first-round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first-round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first-round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind, and we'll score the